I'll be reading. I do not have a presentation to put on the computer, so I'll be reading. Kindly pay attention. In their book, What is Philosophy?, Gilles Deleuze, Felix Guattari described philosophy as a field for creating concepts. Is this what philosophical counsel is supposed to do? Are we supposed to create concepts? If I had thought about philosophical practice before the pandemic, I would have imagined myself teaching philosophy, perhaps in a private setting, but to a counselee, not a student. However, I'm thinking about philosophical counseling amid pandemic, amid loss of life, amid grief and uncertainty. Fear, grief, and uncertainty have been much deliberated upon concepts in philosophy. However, each one of us are experiencing fear, grief, vulnerability, and uncertainty as a phenomena. Could those who are trained to create concepts be of some purpose for the society at large? According to Peter Rabi, philosophical counseling involves a trained philosopher helping a person articulate an issue or a matter that affects them. If not creating concepts, then perhaps assisting people in examining the concept and in figuring out the meaning of the same. At some point of time, the pandemic will be past us, but not the system of oppression we have been dwelling in since over the centuries. And this, I want to mention that during the entire conference, the term Indian philosophy and Indian culture has been used very loosely, and mostly it comes to tradition. And in that tradition, when we're talking about, we end up mostly talking about Bhagavad Gita, which is a part of orthodox system of Indian philosophy. Perhaps it is the concept of systemic oppression which philosophical counselor can address, because systemic oppression limits the possibility of life for many. In her paper, Systemic Dehumanization in the Age of Pandemic Terrorism, Rose Reed argues that the living condition as created by systemic oppression are undeniable aspects of people's reflected and non-reflective modes of being. Therefore, addressing systemic oppression falls within the domain of philosophical counseling. In her book, Ethics of Ambiguity, feminist existential philosopher Simone de Beauvoir argues that human beings are capable of coming over a natural calamity, such as earthquake or floods, but what makes overcoming oppression difficult is that it is caused by other human beings. Various news reports in India and reports released by Coalition Group of Dalit Human Rights Defender indicate that centuries-old pattern of caste oppression did not stop despite COVID-19 preventive lockdown. The caste oppression is practiced in various forms. It is rather counterproductive to make lists of acts of oppression. What we know is that the oppression of caste is causing death, both social and physical. It is anti-life. In this paper, in the first part, I discuss the systemic dehumanization within caste system. In the second section, I highlight the limitation of orthodox schools of Indian philosophy in addressing the systemic oppression of caste, and argue that its use can compromise with the freedom of the counselee. In the final section, I argue that the theory of satyashodak propounded by Mahatma Jotiba Phule serves as a foundation for anti-caste counseling in India, because a satyashodak is guided by the idea of freedom and authenticity in their quest for truth. I would like to mention that which I think we can come. So here's the first section, mental health in caste system. Caste system is not merely a social layering which lies behind endogamy, hegemony, rational division of labor, and most importantly, difference. According to Jordan, caste is an ideology which supports practice of oppression and inequality. The consciousness of caste location is imbibed among children from the very beginning. For the upper caste children, it is the religious paraphernalia, style of clothing, food preparation, and the idea of purification through which caste consciousness is formed. On the other hand, The children of the oppressed community and caste are informed about their caste location through segregation, office space, and punishment on transgression. A prominent psychiatrist, cultural psychiatrist, Shweta Goswami, invites mental health professionals to do a self-analysis to acknowledge how their cultural and social identities have shaped their understanding and processes of theorization and practices, and how this has impact on the subject seeking help in the clinic. Interesting aspect of caste oppression is that the oppressor caste suffers as well from anxiety, fear, and restlessness on the idea of equality. A classic example is affirmative action of reservation, which is met by protest, sorry. Yeah, I'm mentioning that. They may go to the level of self-annihilation in attempt to maintain caste system. In the 1990s, the Indian government extended affirmative action reservation for the other backward communities on the basis of recommendation made by Mandal Commission. This move to transform the material realities of OBC communities led to the series of protests throughout the country. And some member of the upper caste community chose to die by suicide in the mode of protest. That is very serious. We have also seen that recently during online classes in IIT Kharagpur, a remedial class of English, upper caste professor, everybody saw that that professor was ridiculing these Dalit students to not able to understand what she was trying to say. And she not only stopped at ridiculing, but that ridiculing was casteist in nature and the words that she used. Now, on the other hand, the psychological terrorism of caste oppression has forced innumerable members of oppressed community, Adivasi, Vimukta, and Dalit to take their own lives. So do you understand? It is not only here we should understand that it is not only the victimization that is a problem here, or the psychological impact because of the oppression on the oppressed, but there is something happening with the oppressor and their psychological makeup as such. Now, Shweta, working clinically as a psychiatrist anthropologist, faced a challenge from his Dalit Avatari informant in Uttar Pradesh. Shweta shares that a person asked, "We are grateful you will try to understand psychological experience of discrimination, but once you open up our wounds, what will you do next?" This led Shweta to do exploratory work on practical ways to address the psychological suffering of the victim of caste-based violence. Drawing on the frameworks of Franz Fanon, Auguste Boal, and Dalit social movement, Jadhav is piloting an approach which is against medicalizing oppression or pathologizing Dalits as victims, while paying attention to the psychological effects of landscapes of caste. Above all, this requires working with caste as relational phenomena and attending to cultural dynamics of prejudice and perpetration rather than diagnosing disorder within the victim of caste abuse. Now I move to the second part, limitation of orthodox school of Indian philosophy for philosophical counseling. I would like to keep it short here. So here, the two limitation of orthodox Indian philosophy is that it is authoritative in nature, and in being so, it harms human subjectivity. The notion of universal Atman is offered to explain away the hegemonic living system of caste, that ultimately we are one, we are same one Atman. Thus, there is an idea of saming which is used by those who try to explain away inequalities and help in maintaining and perpetuating the system of caste. that we all are the same underlying. However, is this a message for me? Okay. So here I would like to talk about the saming aspect and othering, which what saming does, saming removes the, okay, let me read. I'm using here Irigaray and Buar's explanation of othering and saming. While Irigaray and Buar presents radically different theories of women's subjectivity, and with women's subjectivity, here I will extend it to oppressed subjectivity. It is important to note that they can be also understood as articulating two sides of same problem. And here I'm reading quotes from Naomi Shore. That is where Bua analyzes the process of othering, the way women is fixed in place as other. The second sex, Irigaray may be said to expose the process of saming, the process in which women as other is not the other at all, but only a defective male. So here we can extend it to a defective Brahmin. That's what the oppressed communities, be it Dalit and Muktas, Adivasis, are understood as. The once you cover up all your vices, then you become a Brahmin. Saming is for Irigaray the logic of identity that permeates Western thought. It is the logic and also the Indian. It is a logic whose conceptualization of otherness allow only a pseudo difference, a semblance of difference to emerge. Women as other in identity logic is not truly other according to Irigaray, but merely a reverse or inferior copy of man. She is defined only in negative terms, in terms of absence, defect, and want. Women not only lack a penis, but because of this is said to have diminished rational capacities. The concept of women in the metaphysical dualism of patriarchal thought leaves all that is specific to women unthought, unspoken, and unsymbolized. Whereas Bua analysis of othering involves attributing to the objectified other a difference that serves to legitimize her oppression. The process of saming described by Irigaray denies the objectified other the right to her difference. The challenge of the feminist theory here becomes that of thinking women by thinking Bua and Irigaray, othering and saming together, which we should deal in. We should try to explore this aspect of othering and saming more in the other contexts of oppression. I will quickly now talk about freedom, authenticity, satyashodak, anti-caste ethics for counseling. Mental health is described as an appropriate balance between the individual, their social group, and large environment, pretty much as we understand our being in a tripartite connection of the self, other, and the world. Okay, how much time do I have? We see that the watertight compartments of caste do not allow for interactions to happen, and which leads to anxieties. In her paper, The Practice of Sartre's Philosophy in Philosophical Counselling and Existential Psychotherapy, Shulamit Schuster questions the authoritative approach. If the personal dominant convictions of the philosophical practitioner are authoritative and deny the counselor the freedom of developing his or her views, such influence is to be rejected since it obstructs the development of authentic thought. Now, Buva explains the link between freedom and expression of freedom, that is authenticity, and how this existence can be best ensure a life that is project illustrative of, but not dependent on these factors. This distinction between dependency and illustration is of paramount importance to philosophical counseling because dependency undermines freedom and authenticity and render a project of one's in bad faith, whereas illustration represents freedom in action as it creates mutuality as a fertile space uncumbered by method restriction.
Shweta,
now, okay, I'll just conclude this.
Please wind up, you're already beyond time.
Oh, all right. So now here comes Jotiba Phule's 33 Commandments of Truth Seeker. Why the 33 commandments of truth seeker are important, because Jotiba Phule emphasizes in these 33 commandments the importance of authentic human existence and exercise of freedom. Okay, there's a limitation of time. However, I would like to talk that in this freedom and authentic practice, what happens, guided by the 33 commandments of Jotiba Phule, there is a place for vulnerability that allows for people to make sense of themselves and the relationship with other and the world. That is what we need. And here I conclude. Thank you.